All right, gentlemen.
Yeah.
So we are back. We are on podcast only version. This is Marketing MadMen After Dark. We got Joe Ciucci here and we got Tom McCorkle. So Joe, I'm going to go back to you. So you've been with bands. You've traveled with bands. I will start with my crazy story. I'm not going to name the artist. Actually, I'll tell two crazy stories real quick. One was, and I will say the artist, God bless him, but I don't think it's going to surprise anybody. One was I was working in a venue, and as a director of sponsorship, I was one of 3 people that was allowed to be around for sound check, right? You don't want to be around for sound check. Yep. And this is just as the Live Nation wave of they're starting to really manipulate music. Yep. And I'm walking around, I'm going, and I hear a sound coming from the speakers that could only be akin to a dying giraffe. Like, and I am like, what the hell is going on? And actually, in fact, it was Ozzy Osbourne's sound. He couldn't even sing anymore. He couldn't even get the words out. Right. And it is like an animal dying. And then sure enough, concert starts, they flip on the post-processing, and it sounds like Ozzy Osbourne.
Right.
So it was depressing, but at the same time, it was my first glimpse into, how this really works. The second one was, I won't name the artist. I can name the artist. No, it's not going to surprise anyone anyway. But this said artist still had Jack Daniels, cocaine, and hookers on his rider. And because he had been grandfather claused into the venue from the 70s and 80s when these things were just part of business, like, we had to adhere to the rider. Sure. So in the rider, and I go back, I go backstage after every show. It is not somebody I particularly liked because it was just not my kind of music. And I thought he was a little scammy, but I grew to like him. And I was backstage and I go, oh my God. And it was, first of all, he was the nicest human being alive. He was like the coolest dude I'd ever been around. And it was another one of the reality of it. I'd done a lot of shows in Vegas where I'd have artists come and we'd be at tables together and all that stuff, but they were the new wave of artists, right? They weren't the guys who were behaving like Motley Crue. And that's such a stark difference. So, you go into as much detail as you want. You can say fuck as many times as you want. We're off air now. So talk a little bit about just the crazy things you've seen, how the generations have changed of music. What's wrong with music now? We're open forum, brother. Hit it.
Wow, that's a wide open one.
Yeah.
So, Tom and I go and visit Bunny Carlos of Cheap Trick. And Bunny is telling us some of their legendary stories. Yeah. They blew up, I want to say it's 5 years ago, but it wasn't. Live at Budokan, where they just exploded. And they couldn't even go outside. And so then you fast forward to 2 months ago, where guys in the Zac Brown band are telling me what their riders were when, down the road at the Dixie Tavern to, bring in bottles of Jägermeister on stage. And, the unmistakable sound of the Jaeger bottle thing inside that, to this day, I can't drink Jägermeister. And so these guys have gone from bringing bottles of Jaeger on stage to where they don't drink until after the show.
You almost can't.
To where they're like,
you almost. I went to go see.
You're gonna die. You think you're gonna be Motley Crue, but you're not.
I went to go see Green Day at Truist Park, right? And I was iffy. Like, I saw the Pumpkins. I love Smashing Pumpkins. It was amazing. Okay, and I love Green Day individually, but for whatever reason, the music doesn't hold up as well as I wanted it to.
Right.
Okay? I'll leave it at that. That dude came out. Yep. And was like an Olympic athlete. He was flying around the stage, hit every note, and apparently, from what I hear, they train for 6 months to do these shows.
Yes.
They eat clean, they have dietitians.
Yeah.
It has become such a different part of it, but it has to be, because to pay the ticket prices, people are expecting a flawless show. They're not expecting Janis Joplin to miss a note and fall off the stage, or Santana to have an LSD badge in his thing at Woodstock. Right. That's not what they want anymore.
No, they're going full bore. Trey Cool's going. They'll go from. They'll lose 30, 40 pounds and get in shape.
And for me, it frustrates me,
right? Because
I feel like I'm being served a fake product. Like, if I want that crap, I'll buy the record, right? Like, we know it's fake on the record. I want the flawed music. I want the parts. I don't need a guy dancing. I'm not at a freaking ballet. I want people that play rock and roll. So anyway, I don't know what the hell we were talking about. I just went on a tangent there, but
riders,
how in shape they are. Yes.
Yeah, but again, the riders, some of it they do as a joke, but when they talk about drinking and doing some of those things, for the tours that they have, you just can't, because they're not kids anymore.
Yeah.
And, they'll tell you privately they just can't sustain it. Again, you switch gears from rock and roll, Jason Aldean. Those guys will have a drink in that band and stuff, but it's like, okay. But you talk to Rich, the drummer, he works out nonstop.
Yeah.
Because they're doing it for 2 hours.
Yeah, but as a drummer, you can't. You're putting the metronome for the whole band. If you miss a note, you can throw everything off.
They all know. And again, the drummer that I missed more than anybody, I'm a huge fan of Taylor Hawkins. And again, that's, the downside of that, how he passed away.
Yeah.
Just terrible issues.
Yeah.
And a lot of it was, you didn't know, just reading interviews and watching these things. Absolutely one of my favorite drummers. His was anxiety.
Yeah.
Huge. I mean, you would think that a guy like that was completely at home, scared to death of being on stage.
Yeah.
And he was that good.
And those are the things the alcohol doesn't help. So they're starting
Correct.
to find out now how dopamine and serotonin work, and the alcohol floods your brain with dopamine but never hits you with the serotonin. So you're always feeling anxious without feeling the relief. And that's what they prey on, by the way. Casinos, all these industries.
Yep.
We've learned so much about the brain now that what we're trying to do is create this dopamine drip that never has the serotonin end. So you're always just wanting the next thing.
Well, that's why the casinos are pumping oxygen in.
Oh, I know that. I took
And have no windows.
so I took so many psychology of gambling courses in Vegas. It turned me into a pretty good gambler because, like, when I'm sober, it's put it this way: when you're sober, you're never going to win, but it's easier to not lose when you're making educated, smart things. It's when you're hammered, you're chasing your bets, which literally there's big signs at the casino say they don't chase bets, but you're still. It's amazing. All right, Tom. So you traveled obviously all over the world. Alcohol, the industry itself is leading it. Talk about some crazy things you saw. Talk about Europe. I'm heading to London in a couple of weeks, and I've been, but I'm going back, and this time with my wife, not crazy study abroad, but talk a little bit about some of the things you saw, some of the crazy things that situations you were thrown in.
One of the best things in that job is we would entertain our clients and take them to the distilleries.
Yeah.
And so you would tour the distilleries and you would go and spend the night. Père is a very famous champagne in Epernay, France, and we would spend the night in the castle there and tour and go underneath, do stuff we're not supposed to do at night. Yeah. One time we were at the Balvenie house when I was working for William Grant, Scotland.
Gotcha.
And I had some clients who were overserved.
I'm glad you told me how to say it. I was like Balvenie this whole time. Balvenie. Yeah. And now I know. That's like with watches. Every time I say something, my owner's like, "That's not how you say it." I'm like, "Oh my god, I'm not. I can't speak Swiss French. I'm sorry."
Yeah, and it's it's fine. Yeah. It's we found out later in the evening, because we've been drinking scotch all night long, expensive scotch, that a couple of guys got out in the middle of the night and went into the barley house and were doing snow angels in the barley house. And the malt master came in the next morning. He's like, "Tom, what the fuck?" He goes, "What are these guys doing?" He goes, I'm like, "What are you talking about?" He's like, "Come here." And I went in there, and there's snow angels out in they were hammered.
And now, to be fair, because I've had this experience.
Is that wrong?
Yeah. I've had this experience
Was that wrong?
at, I think it was Buffalo Trace, but I got a private tour, and they actually allow you to put your hands in the wort and eat it out because it's going to distill and kill any that's in there anyway. So they could probably still use that malt. Like it's
they did. It wasn't that big a deal.
The wort, this is my understanding. I have a very rudimentary understanding, but the wort is almost beer that they distill to become the thing. And because it's going through this process, the alcohol, doesn't matter what's in it, it'll become, it's like rubbing alcohol. It will be disappeared.
That's true.
They let you just put your hand in it, and it's disgusting. It's not it's not something you want to taste. No. But I was like, fuck it. So, yeah, and look, I think those brands, I think that one of the things I really see happening is the tradition and heritage is going to make a comeback.
Yes.
Right? We've been so worried about the influencer and the hot thing. Screw that stuff, man. The French... Look, geopolitically, there's so many things that they don't know how the hell to do it, but they know how to make wine and cheese, dude, really, really well. Spain, Italy.
Yes,
why are we trying to rewrite all this stuff? If you actually go back to these heritage brands and this heritage tradition, there is so much to be found there. Freaking music. One of the problems with current music is they hit a 128 beat metronome, and everyone's on the same thing because it's how your brain's wired. What I think music will go back to it. I think these big festivals are done. I think people are going to want to see an intimate thing with a guy with a guitar on stage, and it's going to become smaller and more intimate, where you see the flaws. Why does everything have to be perfect?
Yes.
There's something to be said about, you go to a band, and a band that can take a song, and it's funny because I say that, and there's sometimes people doing it and piss me off. I saw Chili Peppers twice, and they went too long on soloing their songs when they have 50 hits. I'm like, dude, just play. Go an extra minute or two, but don't do a 14-minute long rendition of Under the Bridge. I don't need to hear it. But anyway, I think we're going to go back to more authentic. I think food. I think people are done farm to table, blah, organic. Who cares? Make food the way they used to make it in fire and see everything happening. And I hope that we go back to it. I don't think that's conservatism. I just think that's how I grew up. My parents were immigrants. I grew up around all these international things, and we've gotten by being fancy, we've actually almost gotten bland.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree, whether it's music or food, the things, my wife and I were talking about this, it's becoming simpler. Don't want to go to a huge concert. Again, I could have gone to the Chili Peppers when they were in town. I gave the tickets away. And it was more meaningful to go a smaller show. Love Zach Brown Band. Went to a party recently, and Clay Cook, the guitarist, he literally was playing a mediocre guitar.
Yeah.
That but it was amazing.
Yeah.
With Danny, the percussionist, playing a little cajon.
Yeah, that being said,
and again, they'd start it, and it was like, okay, it's out of tune, and it,
not everybody gets
and,
access. When you have access, one of the things I got to do in Vegas was Perry Farrell's 50th birthday party.
Yeah.
They went to a topless pool. They put glass over the pool, and he just put a stage up.
Yeah.
Okay, so I saw literally, and I don't remember how I was invited. I was so involved in the industry, but I pretty much saw. I forget the lady's name from Blondie. She was singing "Call Me" with Tom Morello playing a guitar with his teeth.
Deborah Harry.
And Tom Morello was playing guitar with his teeth.
Yeah,
and like
really?
that was what was happening on stage. And you see, and Perry Farrell's playing the drums, and everyone's dancing around. And you're like, this is what. And you're not going to see that all the time, but it has been stripped out of it because we have allowed capitalism and corporations, Live Nation, to take everything about. You got every tour has to fit into a certain box. You have to be on the stage. The lighting has to match to save money. So you can literally be like, all right, I'm going to see this set list from last night. It's the same set list. They do 2 different encores and it just changes. It's such a shame. It's such a shame. Tom, so all the experiences you've had, but the liquor industry is going to change. People's habits have changed.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that's starting to be spoken about, I think when people realize that you can drink a THC drink with 5 milligrams of THC, one with 0 calories, to get the same chilling effect that 3 glasses of wine and 400 calories do, I think it's going to come into limelight. And I think like anything, look, the alcohol industry makes its most money on the addicts. Let's call it what it is. You always make your most money in every industry on the 1%ers of people who consume the most. But I think that the health and the habits, and it's finally starting to resonate with people's heads. I mean, guys, I haven't had a drink since New Year's Day, okay? So it's been a couple of days. I feel like as sharp as I've ever felt in my entire life. And I will do this for 6-7 weeks straight. I cut coffee out, other things, but it's getting very hard.
You cut out alcohol and coffee.
Yeah, and I'm Italian. And I used to drink 3-4 cups a day. I went cold turkey.
It's like we don't even know you.
I don't know myself sometimes. But
Are you sure
what
you're
I
not
learned,
Scandinavian?
life is very short, and I'm going to London for Valentine's Day. And like when I land in London, the alcohol will be that much better, and the coffee will be that much better. Yeah, and it would
I'll
take
have some suggestions for you when you go to London. We were talking about the Balvenie. We were hosting a show over there. We used to do a show for the Balvenie, and the host was Anthony Bourdain. Yeah, and so we got to meet him, and then we started doing events with him.
What was he like? Because I've heard so many stories that he was. The word wasn't too smart for his own good, like almost too clever for his own good. He was in his head. It was just What was the experience like? Did it feel like he was doing something for money, or was he just kind of hanging out?
No, I got the feeling, and I did a dozen or so events with him, and got to go to his house in New York.
Cool.
We did a couple events up there in New York, a couple private parties. We were on a plane one time down to Fort Lauderdale, and he found out I lived in Chicago for a while, and we talked about pizza, and he said, "Oh my God, that deep dish stuff is an abomination."
It's an abomination.
He goes, "It's just
the amount of butter, if you've ever seen it made, that they put into it, the way it cooks together. I mean, I get it. Like every once in a while, I will fiend a good Chicago, but I can have a slice, and then I want something.
That's
real.
fine. It's a casserole. I mean,
I can't wait to get a nice slice of pizza tomorrow when I go to New York.
New York, I gotta have that. That's what we were talking about, the differences in that. But he was just laid back. He was funny. I get to meet his good friend Eric Rapport because he's got his restaurant in New York. La Bourdin. Yeah, and so we got to spend a lot of time with him on those kinds of things because of the working relationship. Yeah, and he was he was what you saw on TV. To me, he was a fun, laid back guy. He didn't like a whole lot of people around. Yeah, but because I was with the company that was paying him, we spent a lot of time and got to know each other, and that was fun. Yeah. So it was a very unfortunate thing when he passed. Yeah. But he liked to have a good time.
Yeah, I mean, look, it tends to be the best people at what they do, especially in TV and music, are the ones that die, right? Like, losing Cornell and Weiland and Chester Bennington from Linkin Park, that was my generation. Losing Janis Joplin and Jim Morrison. Like, if you go back and listen, and like, there's a reason you can hear the pain in people's voices, and that's what makes them great musicians, right? I love the party guys, all that stuff. They will never last as long as the Nirvanas and the guys who died, because the pain and they lose themselves in the music, because that's how they cope with the craziness that's going on in their head. I was going to say one thing. I don't remember where I read it, but I think one of the things that this world nowadays is lacking is nuance. We have lost the nuance in everything. Everything is so quick, and we're moving and everything. We've lost the nuance. And one of the things that I loved about Bourdain was there was nuance to everything, right? It wasn't I love this, it's I love this because of this, and it makes you think about things differently. One of the things I like about really good old classic rock is the pace switched. There was nuance to everything. I just feel like what we're doing in this world now, we lack nuance with everything.
Right. So what you talked about earlier of everything at 128 beats per minute, okay? People always talk about John Bonham as a drummer. Yep. Okay? But if you listen, if there's guys that do this on different things. The tempo fluctuates on some of these things, like "Fool in the Rain" and some of these just iconic drum beats. They fluctuate.
Yeah.
So if you put them on a music grid,
Of course.
and I've seen people do it, and they line them up, make it perfect. It sounds awful.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't have that human element.
Yeah.
Like even some of those songs that, those original recordings, you can hear his kick pedal squeaking.
Yeah.
They didn't fix it.
Yeah.
They didn't fix the tempo.
but it's funny
but it's
because
organic and it's awesome.
It's too homogenized.
When rock and roll came out of really rhythm and blues
Yes.
that had jazz influence in it, and if you
Yes.
are listening to jazz, I mean, look, I'm not talking Coltrane, I'm talking Mingus. It is a wreck. If you
Yes.
ever tried to plot out Thelonious Monk or Mingus,
it's a train wreck.
It's a train wreck.
Yes.
But when you listen to it, it's unbelievably pleasing. So rock didn't come out of homogenized stuff. It came out of, and look, the earliest things were very BPM, Chuck Berry, they're very BPM driven.
Yes.
But when you talk about the greatest songs, and I'm always a pace guy. I love songs that change pace.
Yes.
Right? Even Elton John, Funeral for a Friend, like just songs that are ballady but change pace so many times. That's what I like. That's not easy for a drummer to do because you're changing the whole metronome of the music. Do they do that very much anymore? I don't hear it very often.
I mean, look, the ones that you listen to, I mean, some of the last Foo Fighters stuff, the Red Hot Chili Peppers will do it. Some of those things, but not a ton. Not a ton. They all...
They want to follow that formula.
No offense to radio. The rock radio, country radio want a 3.5-minute song
Yeah.
that is on a click track, on a grid.
Yeah.
And
it's a shame. It's a damn shame. But that being said, everything goes in cycles.
Yes.
We will cycle away from it. The concept of a pop star will change. Like we're going to bring some more soul back. I don't know when it's going to happen, but I've been doing a lot of history of this country, studying and pop culture and money and everything. And every time it has changed so much. And you see the changes happening. I think what happened was COVID should have been the change because we couldn't do these things, but we built out so much pent up demand that we're still riding the coattails of pent up demand, right? You see it. Taylor Swift. I mean, she sold out billions, but she couldn't tour for 3 years. So a lot of that is built up stuff. What you're seeing now is the biggest, best getting all the attention, and the smaller stuff, and that's because everyone wants to post on social media they were there, which is freaking pathetic. If you're going to a show because you think your friends care, that's the opposite of what music does, but it's unfortunate truth.
Well, that always strikes my wife and I as just it just makes me go crazy. Is we're fortunate enough, we're close to the stage, and you see a young man or a young woman in the first row or second row, and Taylor Swift or Justin Timberlake or somebody, and they're right there, and rather than looking 2 feet away, connecting, they turn around to do a video selfie.
Yeah.
I mean, they literally turn their back on the artist, and you can just see you just want to go, whap, hit them right in the back of the head, like, dude, they're right there. You could fist bump them, and you turned around.
And you'll never look at those pictures.
No. Well, they never look right.
Chance. You have a million pictures. Like, I still go back and I had like a Polaroid and I look at like pictures of Polaroid because it's in a book because you only have 20 to take. You have to take good ones.
Yes.
It's such a shame. All right, gentlemen, this has been great. We're going to end with this, okay? We're going to go industry specific. So, Tom, I want you to think about the best drink you've ever had, where it was and what it was. And Joe, I want you to think about the best show you've ever saw and why. Okay.
Yeah.
And we're in the podcast, so you guys can take a second. Now. We can pause this one here.
Best show.
We can pause this one here.
Okay.
I will. You know what? I will start with a recent best show, and it follows. So, I worked for Live Nation for 2 years. So my job was to be at shows. So it was everywhere.
Yep.
I used to go to Hangout Fest every year, Bonnaroo. I was at the Woodstock in '99. I was 16 years old. I conned my parents letting me go to that. I've seen a lot of music. But the best recent thing, you talk about cell phone, was we have our concert club seats at State Farm, which are literally you're in this raised club and the speaker is pretty much hitting you in the face.
Yep.
Love it.
And I wanted to go see Tool at State Farm.
Oh, wow.
Okay, so first thing is, and I've seen him before, is Maynard is a maniac. He hides behind a curtain because he hates being in front of people.
Yep.
But they come on, he goes, all right, he goes, everyone, he goes, do me one favor. And he goes, it's not a favor because I will kick you out of here. Phone's in your pocket. If you take out a phone, take a camera, I have bodyguards everywhere, you're out.
Yep.
So nobody had their phones. And he goes, we're going on a journey. All I want you to do is give me 2 hours of your attention. If that's 2 hours, get the fuck out of here.
Yep.
Okay, so everyone is just enthralled in it. They are literally fish with electric guitars. It's a jam band.
Yeah.
There's no method to the music.
Nope.
They are just playing face melting. It goes from like melodic to just and I sat I won't say what I did to get my mind right for it, but we had some extracurriculars to make my mind right. But holy crap, did I enjoy that 2 hours of not having anything to look at but stare at a speaker. I'm probably still half deaf, that's why I'm yelling.
Yep.
But it's not my favorite meet by any means, but it was such a reminder of what music should be.
Yep.
And it's a shame because it was all 50-years-olds that were there.
Yeah.
Right. There were no kids there. That's what the kids needed to see. Right. So anyway, hopefully that gets your brains going. So Tom, why don't you go first? What about just a drink, really memorable drink, where and what it was?
I've got the drink, but before I do that, I want to tell you a quick rock and roll story as far as shows. And it wasn't one, it was 4 in a row. And I'd call it the best 4 days of my music audience career.
Yeah.
And a buddy of mine, Lou, who was a VP at Marriott at the time, we did a lot of shows together. He said, look, I got tickets for Jay Giles' band in D.C. Once you come up on a Thursday night. No problem, I'll be there. Well, the Wednesday night before, right here down the street over at Cumberland, whatever the venue is over here now.
Yeah, Cobb Galleria.
Yeah, Cobb Galleria. My son at the time was a huge fan of the Wiggles, which is a band from...
I know the Wiggles, Australia.
I've been to a Wiggles
My
concert.
son is 3. I'm very wiggly.
There you go. Well, we got to go
as wholesome, by the way. These you can't even trust these guidelines. What they say is TV appropriate. The Wiggles are one of the more wholesome things. Besides the sexual attention, besides the sexual attention between the yellow one and the purple one who are married, besides the blatant sexual attention on television.
You get it.
Go on.
So we went. So I said, look, my son Jay, I told him I'm taking you to the show, and we knew somebody working there. And right in the middle of the show at the time, Murray, the guy in the red guitar, comes up behind us and starts talking to us. And my son's, it was to see how excited he was. He was probably 6 at the time. It was just fantastic. So I'm like, okay, this is the start of my rock and roll tour. So we did that. The next day, I'm up in D.C. with my buddy Lou. We go see Jay Giles' band at some small dive bar. Next night's a
9:30
Friday.
Club, I would bet.
I think that was it.
9:30 Club.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I lived in D.C.
And,
for 7 years, too.
we take the train up to Philly the next day to go see my first U2 show.
Cool.
And it was at the stadium, and it was just amazing. And then the next night, I'm taking Lou to Yankee Stadium to see Paul McCartney.
Yeah.
Wow.
And at the time, I'm working for Absolute Vodka, and I'm a Beatles freak.
Yeah.
It's an understatement, as Joe knows. So anyway, we go up there, and he calls me. He goes, dude, my wife's going to kill me. I can't do 3 shows in a row. I said, well, what am I going to do? So I get up there, and I call my assistant at the time, and she said, look, the president of Live Nation at the time, I don't know if you knew Brian Yost, was a friend of mine because he had worked at Marriott. He was the head of beverage at Marriott for years. I'd called him. I said, Brian, if you have any tickets, I'm going to be in New York City. I've got some okay tickets, and didn't hear from him. He's a CEO. He doesn't have time to call me back. So she calls me and says that there's some tickets here. I said, I'm on the train. I'm going to Bronx to Yankee Stadium. She's like, I think you need to come back. I'm like, you got to be kidding me. I go, she goes, you think I should just go? And she goes, listen, it's the CEO. You think these tickets are any good? Get your ass back here. Yeah. So I go pick them up, and I walk in. I'm by myself.
Awesome. Those are always the best. Those are always the best, by the way.
Yeah.
I walk down out by yourself in the world. Woo.
First time ever. I'd never even seen the Yankees play there before. I have now. But so I walk in, and every time I get to a usher, they're like, "You're down there. You're down there." I'm on the front row. Paul McCartney, right smack in the middle. Wow. And so those were my best 4 days in a row of music. Cool. So it was jamming.
I'm sure it was the unexpectedness of it too.
Yes.
Those are things that had to fall in place the right way.
Yeah.
And look, let's be fair. Whenever you go into something thinking it's going to be the best day of your life, it's always the worst. That's why New Year's Eve sucks. It's when you're not expecting it and things fall away and you're like, you know what? I don't have it that freaking bad, man. No. I have it pretty damn good. And I think, look, I don't want people to think it's that easy because of the industry, like the industries we're in, it makes it easier to be able to do these things, right? Like I've been around stars and athletes and in situations that I have no business being in, and it hardens you because what you realize is these are regular people, and what you don't do is make an ass out of yourself. Stay quiet. If someone speaks to you, you speak. Otherwise, smile on your face and enjoy yourself.
Just enjoy being there.
So that's awesome. All right, what about drink?
Drink definitely, and it's more, cocktails are cocktails. And I spent 30 years in that business, 25 years. We opened at the time Marriott was opening a new brand called the Edition Hotel. There's one in Manhattan. We were opening a brand new one in London, downtown London. And so I went there and I got ready to order something lame, like Jameson and ginger ale or a vodka tonic or something. And the bartender goes, I have to make you my old fashioned. Because you're a bourbon guy, you got to have it. And just being there, it was a grand opening, all the excitement. And I think it's the experience.
Yeah,
like
you
talk about cocktails.
Is a very London-y drink. Old school,
and it was
simple.
Yeah, simple. But that, for some reason, that cocktail stands out.
Do you remember the bourbon they used?
Yeah, it was Basil Hayden.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, so they're lighter.
Yeah.
See, if I do old fashioned, I usually go with rye. Yeah. Because they're already sweetening it, and Basil Hayden's a little light. So I usually go with something with some bite on the back end.
And I'm more of a bourbon in my old fashioned than a rye guy because the traditional recipe is rye.
Is rye.
You know, that's what you should use.
Yeah.
But I said, no.
They just. My palate is bourbon. I drink bourbon on the rocks. That's really what I drink. So if I drink an old fashioned, there's too much sweetness putting in. So I like the burn of the rye to counter with the sweetness they put in.
I'll send you guys this clip. I know I sent it to you about people that have their bourbon collection and how insane they are. And it's one of the guys from SCTV. He was on Christopher Guest. No, was that Christopher Guest? Yeah. Anyway, he comes up to a cabin. He's like, I want to talk to you guys. And he's very serious at how big people take their bourbon collection. And he opens the door. He goes, I want to share with you my beach ball collection. He says, I've got 500 of them. And he talks just like it's a bourbon collection. It's hilarious. I'll send it to you.
Yeah, I fell ass backwards into bourbon collecting. And it was because the Heaven Hill guys are close friends of mine. And they would say, hey, if you go to this store, the allocated stuff is yours, just drop the name. And I would go and I got to know the owner of the store. And I'd walk in and he'd be like, buy this one. I'd be like, dude, I go, I don't have $1,200 spent on bourbon. He goes, buy the bourbon. So I walk out, and now I have the original, the Heaven Hill 17, the first one they ever made, which is worth $4,000 now. I get an old
have you cracked it open?
No, nothing's open.
You're just looking at it.
He gives me 1 or 2 bottles that he'll give me for half what they should cost. That are like $100 bottles that he gives me for $50 and says, drink these so you don't drink these. But I don't know what the fuck I'm doing with it. I just have all this bourbon in my house, and it's something. I buy bottles for my brother and my dad. My dad doesn't even drink and collects bourbon. His cabinet, because he's like a coin guy, a watch guy. I open his cabinet. Like, there's 75 bottles of bourbon here. I go, you haven't drank in 20 years. And I look at him and I go, because I know he's collected to give it to me. Like, I go, but you realize like no one's gonna ever sell this. So you're just passing alcoholism. It just skipped you.
I hadn't thought of collecting bourbon. I mean,
so many people do.
I collect vintage drum. I have a vintage drum set.
It's going to fluctuate wildly. Yeah. But what's going to happen is, like, for example, this one I got was the first edition of what will be a 100-year collection. So it will be worth something. And then I got anniversary editions. I got a Four Roses 135. Yeah. So the ones that you will, if it's just a 18-year one that's allocated, it will be at the price or a little below it. It's not going to change. But those really anniversary ones, because they will be sought after for years after. And so, like baseball cards, there's a guide. There's actually a bourbon guide where you can go through the prices and everything. It's crazy. Now, that being said, one of the reasons my affinity is to things I found, I like watches, I like cars, and I like bourbon. And the reason is because the barrier to entry is so high, right? Yeah. No one's going after Porsche, right? The watch brands, the Omegas of the world, no one's going after them. So when you buy their stuff, it will be worth the same amount or more eventually. Yeah. Yeah. And I like that part of it, right? I don't like throwing money away on garbage. Like, if you're collecting vodka, you're a fool. Every vodka is supposed to taste the same. It's a neutral spirit. It does. It's by water. Definition, it is supposed to taste the same. Right. Yeah. So anyway, so many tangents. All right, Joe. The spotlight's on you, bud. Best show, favorite show.
Just to finish that thought, you're collecting bourbon and watches. I'm collecting vintage drums. So as
we got a dude in museum here. Tom. What do you collect?
Drums.
There you go. Yeah. We got a
so
dude.
He went to see Bunny Carlos in Chicago with me, and I have a couple of his drum sets, and I've got
on display
20. I've got them at home. Yeah, cool. A couple of dozen snare drums. So Tom's line before we get to Bunny's, I am not buying a snare drum.
I'm not buying
10 minutes into it.
I need a snare drum.
Bunny, would you take $1,000 for that snare drum? I mean, it wasn't 10 seconds. So yes. So but my favorite.
We need to have a drum, bourbon, and watch expose.
We can put them all together. No, I'm blessed to have a Bunny drum, a Van Halen drum, a lot of really cool drums. But for me, I think as I'm sitting here today, when I would say is my most memorable concert. I've always been a huge Foo Fighters fan. My wife and I, solid parenting, we pulled our kids out of school to go see the Foo Fighters when they played here in Atlanta, and it rained, and we were there. Loved the show, but I remember when Dave Grohl came out and Taylor Hawkins, and they were both wearing Claremont Lounge shirts. And again, solid parenting, my kids are like looking up what the Claremont Lounge is and having all that discussion. So,
now it's a restaurant.
Yeah, so now it's
okay.
So it's like a tapas restaurant.
There's no boobies taking off bottle tops. That's a different story for Dylan.
Blondie's not there. Well, no, but the thing that was memorable is we went. Laura and I took Aiden and Nick, our kids, and I hadn't met him yet. I knew who he was, but we're standing there, and I walk just to my right, and it's John Driscoll Hopkins of the Zac Brown Band, who I've now become really good friends with. I'm wearing his Hop on a Cure. But that's the first day that I met him. Was he's there as a fan.
Got it.
Acting like the 10-year-old that we were, and it's a guy with multiple Grammys. And then, so it's sort of gone full circle. We're there with my wife, there with my kids. It's a great show. and then you meet him, and you're in his studio, and all those sorts of things. So that for me is the one that stands out. Favorite drink for me is, I know you bourbon guys don't like vodka, but vodka's my drink. So I'm in London at this really small boutique hotel. In the middle of the day, shockingly, I'm sitting at the bar, and in walk 3 Belvedere vodka salesmen.
Oh, I love Belvedere.
And so their job is to have the bartenders make them the latest, greatest, whatever cool thing is. And all they would do is stick a straw in and taste it and then hand me their drink. So I got there at lunch, and the next thing you know is
some bomb.
5 drinks deep.
Don't you have dinner reservations? So apparently I had some lost time with the Belvedere vodka salesman.
Not a boy. I had a Polish girlfriend that has fond memories. So Belvedere is my poison, just because it's Polish. Because you go that way. That's how it works sometimes. And look, I think it's fun. That's kind of what you get out of all this stuff, right? Like, look, I'm not. This is not advice to younger people, but just enjoy the freaking moment, man. If you shut your mouth, put a smile on your face, wander around, you can fall ass backwards into the coolest situations of your life. Don't be annoying. Don't pout. Don't be whiny, and you will enjoy it. And I didn't know that's what we were going to get out of this, but that is now the overarching lesson.
Pretty much it is.
Screw it. We're leaving on that. You've been listening to the Marketing MadMen. Thanks for listening.